Captain Vextar pressed his scaled hand against the cold metal console and watched the blue planet spin slowly on his ship's main screen. His yellow eyes studied the swirling white clouds and green landmasses below. After 40 years of exploring space for the Zeltharian Empire, he had seen many worlds like this one. Most were empty. Some had simple animals. A few had thinking creatures that could be useful. This planet looked different, though. Strange metal objects flew through its atmosphere in neat patterns. Bright lights dotted the dark side where night had fallen. Radio waves bounced between the surface and small objects orbiting overhead. These were clear signs of intelligent life. "What do you see down there, Science Officer Krelzon?" Vextar asked without turning around. The shorter alien bent over his instruments, his forearms working quickly across different control panels. "The electromagnetic readings show they have discovered electricity and basic electronics, Captain. They have split the atom and created simple spacecraft. Their population appears to be around 7 billion individuals concentrated in large settlements." Vextar nodded slowly. 7 billion was a good number. Not too few to be useless. Not too many to cause problems during integration. "Any signs of faster-than-light travel?" "None, sir. Their most advanced vessels barely reach their own moon. They appear to be confined to their home system." "Perfect." Vextar activated his communication device and sent a message across the vast emptiness to Admiral Corinth's flagship. The Dark Sovereign waited 3 light years away with enough firepower to turn entire planets to glass. But based on what they were seeing, such extreme measures would not be needed here. The reply came, back within minutes. "Proceed with standard first contact protocols, Captain. If they show the usual response pattern, we can have them integrated within 6 months. Vexitar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. 6 months was generous. Most species surrendered within weeks once they understood what they faced. The Zeltharian Empire had perfected this process over 3,000 years. They had absorbed 847 different intelligent species across 12 galaxies. Each one followed the same predictable path from first shock to eventual grateful acceptance of imperial guidance. Far below on the planet's surface, Jake Morrison sat in the command center of the human research station called Horizon. The facility floated in Earth's upper atmosphere, held aloft by advanced repulsor technology that humanity had developed only 5 years earlier. Jake was young for a commander at 28, but he had earned his position through skill and dedication rather than family connections. "Sir, we're picking up something unusual on the deep space sensors," reported Lisa Palmer from her monitoring station. The scientist's voice carried a note of excitement that made Jake look up from his daily reports. "Define unusual, Dr. Palmer." Lisa's fingers danced across her keyboard, pulling up readings that made no sense according to everything humans knew about physics. "Multiple objects approaching from outside our solar system. They're big, maybe 2 kilometers long each, and, sir, they're moving faster than anything we've ever built." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. For 50 years, humans had been listening to space, hoping to hear some sign that they were not alone in the universe. Radio telescopes had found nothing. Deep space probes had discovered empty worlds and dead rocks. Most scientists had begun to believe that intelligent life was incredibly rare. "How far out are they?" Jake asked. "They just passed Neptune's orbit. At their current speed, they'll be here in 18 hours. Jake reached for his communication device to contact Earth's Defense Command, but stopped when Lisa spoke again. "Sir, there's something else. I'm detecting structured transmissions coming from the objects. It's not random noise, someone is trying to communicate." Within 6 hours, every major government on Earth knew about the approaching vessels. President Garcia called an emergency session of the United Nations. General Brooks ordered all military forces to high alert. Scientists like Elena Rodriguez worked frantically to decode the alien signals. Dr. Chris Adams led the linguistics team that made the first breakthrough. "They're using mathematics as a base language," he explained to the Emergency Council via video link. "Basic principles that any intelligent species would understand. Addition, subtraction, geometric shapes. But there's something strange about the way they're presenting it." "Strange how?" asked Ambassador Kate Nelson. "It feels condescending, like an adult explaining simple concepts to a child." They're not trying to establish communication between equals. They're talking down to us. Alex Carter listened to the briefing from his position aboard the Orbital Defense Platform Guardian. As a career military officer, he had spent 20 years preparing for conflicts with other human nations. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this moment. But his instincts told him that something was wrong with the whole situation. "Admiral, permission to speak freely?" he said into his headset. "Go ahead, Carter. These aliens have been traveling between stars for who knows how long. They have technology we can barely imagine. But they're announcing themselves from 18 hours away instead of just appearing in orbit. Why give us time to prepare unless they don't see us as a threat?" Before the Admiral could respond, every communication device on Earth and in near orbit activated simultaneously. The alien transmission came through clearly in perfect English, as if the speakers had been using the language their entire lives. "People of the third planet." The voice was calm and measured, with an undertone that reminded listeners of a teacher addressing young students. "We are representatives of the Zeltharian Empire. We have traveled far to bring you an offer of membership in our galactic community. Your species shows promise, and we believe you would benefit greatly from our guidance and protection." The transmission continued for 10 minutes, describing the wonders of galactic civilization and the opportunities that awaited humanity. The aliens spoke of advanced medicine that could eliminate disease, technology that could provide unlimited, clean energy, and knowledge that would unlock the secrets of the universe. But Alex Carter focused on what they didn't say. There was no mention of choice, no discussion of Earth's sovereignty, no recognition of humanity as an equal partner. Every word reinforced the same message. Humanity was primitive, the aliens were advanced, and submission was the only logical response. "We will arrive at your planet in 12 hours, the transmission concluded. "Prepare your leaders for integration discussions. Resistance would be inadvisable and ultimately futile. We have successfully guided 847 species into our community. You will be the 848th. As the signal ended, Jake Morrison looked around the Horizon's command center at his crew's shocked faces. Lisa Palmer stared at her instruments in wonder, still amazed by the reality of alien contact. But Jake found himself thinking about that number. 847 species successfully guided into their community. He wondered how many of those species had actually wanted to join. Captain Vextar reviewed the transmission logs with satisfaction. The response from the planet's surface showed the typical pattern of shock, excitement, and growing apprehension that preceded successful integration. Some individuals were already broadcasting messages of welcome to the approaching fleet. Others were calling for military preparation. Both reactions were normal and manageable. In 18 hours, the Crimson Blade would enter orbit around the Blue Planet, and the Zeltharian Empire would gain its newest member species. Vextar had no reason to suspect that this integration would be any different from the previous 847. He was about to learn that assumptions could be fatal when dealing with humans. The Zeltharian ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like silver teardrops falling from heaven. Each vessel was twice the size of humanity's largest buildings, their hulls gleaming with a light that seemed to come from within the metal itself. They landed in carefully chosen locations around the globe: New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, and 12 other major cities. Commander Zephael stepped out of his transport onto the concrete landing pad that humans had hastily prepared in Central Park. His tall, thin form moved with fluid grace as he surveyed the crowd of humans gathered behind metal barriers. Security forces kept their weapons lowered but ready. News reporters pushed forward with cameras and microphones. Scientists clutched recording devices and notebooks. The alien commander wore a suit of armor that looked more like liquid metal than solid protection. It flowed and shifted as he moved, adapting to his body's motion. A translation device hung around his neck, though he had already mastered human languages during the 18-hour journey to Earth. "I am Commander Zeph-Al of the Zeltharian Diplomatic Corps," he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd without any visible amplification device. "I come to discuss your planet's integration into our empire." Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the front of the scientific observers, her recorder running as she studied every detail of the alien's appearance and technology. She noticed that his armor seemed to repair small scratches instantly. His boots left no mark on the concrete despite his obvious weight. Most interesting was the way other humans seemed drawn to look at him, as if he naturally commanded attention. Commander Zephyl called out Ambassador Kate Nelson, stepping forward as Earth's primary diplomatic representative. "We welcome you to our world. We have many questions about your empire and this integration process you mentioned." The alien's expression showed what might have been amusement. Questions are natural for primitive species encountering advanced civilization for the first time. Your concerns will be addressed during the integration process. For now, observe. Zephyl raised his right hand, and a small device materialized in his palm. He pointed it at a nearby tree and triggered it. The tree instantly turned to dust, leaving only a perfectly shaped hole in the ground. Gasps and screams came from the crowd. Security forces raised their weapons instinctively. "Peace," the alien commander said calmly. "This demonstration shows the gap between our civilizations. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your technology cannot match ours. Resistance is both impossible and unnecessary." To prove his point, Zephyl walked directly toward the security line. The soldiers opened fire with their assault rifles. The bullet struck an invisible barrier around the alien and simply vanished, disappearing into particles of light. The commander didn't even slow down. General Ryan Brooks watched the demonstration through satellite feeds from his command bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around him, military advisors and scientists studied every detail of the aliens' display. The technology seemed impossible by human understanding of physics, but the evidence was undeniable. "Sir," reported Colonel Sam Taylor, "we're seeing the same demonstrations in all 16 landing sites. The aliens are showing off their weapons and defensive systems. Classic intimidation tactics." "But intimidation implies they expect resistance," Brooks replied. "Why waste time scaring us if they could just take over by force?" Dr. Chris Adams looked up from his analysis station. "Maybe because they don't want to rule over radioactive ruins. If they destroy too much infrastructure or kill too many people, we become less valuable to their empire." Meanwhile, in dozens of locations around the world, other humans were drawing the same conclusion. Captain Alex Carter studied reconnaissance photos of the alien landing sites from his orbital platform. The aliens had chosen their locations perfectly. Close enough to major population centers to make a statement, but far enough away to avoid accidental damage to important buildings. "They need us intact," he muttered to himself, then activated his secure communication channel. "This is Carter to all station commanders. Begin passive intelligence gathering on alien technology and capabilities. Use long-range sensors only. Do not engage." Back on the surface, the demonstrations continued. Zephyl and his fellow commanders showed off vehicles that floated without any visible means of propulsion. They displayed weapons that could stun large groups of humans without permanent harm. They demonstrated personal shields that deflected everything from bullets to thrown rocks. But they also made mistakes. Lisa Palmer watched from the research station horizon as the aliens conducted their shows of power. Her job was to monitor and record, but her scientific mind couldn't help analyzing what she saw. After 6 hours of demonstrations, she began to notice patterns. "Jake," she called to Commander Morrison, "I think I'm seeing something important here." "What kind of something?" "Their technology is impressive, but it's not magic. Look at this." She brought up recordings from multiple landing sites on her main screen. "Every time they use those disintegration weapons, there's a brief energy buildup beforehand. When they activate their personal shields, I can detect a specific electromagnetic signature. Their floating vehicles leave trace emissions that our sensors can pick up." Jake studied the data with growing excitement. "You're saying their technology follows rules we can understand?" "Everything follows rules, Jake. Physics is physics, no matter who discovered it first. They're just using principles we haven't figured out yet." Similar observations were being made by scientists around the world. Dr. Rodriguez collected air samples from areas where the aliens had demonstrated their weapons, finding residual particles that hadn't existed in Earth's atmosphere before the demonstrations. Engineers like Maya Thompson analyzed the electromagnetic signatures of alien equipment, building databases of energy patterns and frequencies. The aliens, meanwhile, interpreted humanity's careful observation as natural curiosity from a primitive species encountering superior technology for the first time. They had seen this reaction from hundreds of other worlds. The pattern was always the same: shock, fear, curiosity, and eventually acceptance. But humans were different in ways the Zeltharians didn't recognize. Commander Zephal finished his demonstration in Central Park and prepared to begin formal integration discussions. He expected the humans to ask about the benefits of joining the Empire, to beg for mercy, or to offer immediate surrender. Instead, Ambassador Nelson approached him with a tablet full of questions. "Commander, we're very interested in learning about your technology. Could you explain the scientific principles behind your disintegration weapon? What power source drives your vehicles? How do your personal shields work?" The alien commander blinked in surprise. In 847 previous first contacts, no species had immediately begun trying to understand Zeltharian technology. Most were too frightened or too awed to think analytically. "Such information is not necessary for integration," he replied. "Your scientists will learn what they need to know after you join the Empire." "But we're curious now," Nelson persisted. "Surely there's no harm in sharing basic scientific concepts." What the ambassador didn't mention was that every question she asked was being transmitted in real time to research teams around the world. Teams led by people like Dr. Adams and Dr. Rodriguez, who were already beginning to reverse engineer alien technology from the traces left behind by the demonstrations. Colonel Taylor watched the proceedings from his hidden observation post 2 miles away. Through high-powered scopes, his team documented every piece of alien equipment, every movement, every tactical formation. They noted that the aliens kept their most powerful weapons holstered unless demonstrating them. They observed that the commander's bodyguard stood in predictable patterns that could be exploited. Most importantly, they saw that the aliens were overconfident. They had grown comfortable with easy victories over species that surrendered immediately. They weren't prepared for opponents who smiled and asked questions while secretly preparing for war. As the first day of formal contact ended, Zephal felt satisfied with the progress. The humans were responding exactly as expected, showing appropriate respect for superior technology, while asking for time to consider integration terms. Some had even begun volunteering to serve as intermediaries with their own governments. What he didn't realize was that every human who approached his forces was a carefully selected intelligence gatherer. Military personnel with scientific training, scientists with military backgrounds, engineers who could analyze alien technology, and tacticians who could identify weaknesses. The Zeltharian Empire had spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of conquest through intimidation. They had learned to break a species' will to resist without destroying their usefulness as subjects. But they had never encountered a species that responded to intimidation by immediately beginning to figure out how to fight back. They had never faced opponents who saw superior technology not as proof of divine superiority, but as an engineering problem to be solved. The aliens went to sleep that first night confident that Earth would join their empire within weeks. The humans stayed awake, working by lamplight in hidden laboratories and secret meeting rooms, determined to make sure that would never happen. 6 months had passed since the Zeltharian ships first landed on Earth. Commander Zephal stood in his temporary command center in what used to be the United Nations building, reviewing integration progress reports with growing frustration. The documents spread across his desk told a story he had never seen before in his 40 years of conquest. "The humans continued to request delays for governmental procedures," reported his aide, Lieutenant Vorthak. "They claim their democratic systems require extensive debate before such important decisions can be made." Zephal's clawed fingers drummed against the metal surface. "How long can democratic debate possibly take? We offered them paradise, and they respond with bureaucracy." What the alien commander didn't know was that every day of delay had been carefully planned. In hidden facilities around the world, human scientists and engineers worked around the clock to understand and replicate Zeltharian technology. Dr. Chris Adams had made the first breakthrough 3 months earlier, when he successfully created a primitive version of the alien's energy weapon. The power source is some kind of contained antimatter reaction, Adams explained to his research team in the underground laboratory beneath MIT. "It's incredibly efficient, but the containment system is the real genius." They've found a way to store antimatter in a magnetic bottle no bigger than a coffee cup. Dr. Elena Rodriguez nodded as she studied the readings from their captured alien equipment. We've been analyzing the residue from their demonstrations. The disintegration effect breaks molecular bonds at the quantum level. It's not destroying matter, it's just separating it into component atoms. Maya Thompson looked up from her workbench where she was assembling humanity's first functional shield generator. If we can understand how they contain antimatter, we can build our own power sources. And if we can build power sources, we can power our own weapons and shields. The breakthrough came when a Zeltharian transport suffered a minor mechanical failure during a routine patrol. The alien crew made emergency repairs in full view of human observers, not realizing that telescopes and cameras were recording every detail of their maintenance procedures. There, Adams pointed at the slow-motion footage. When they open that panel, you can see the antimatter containment unit. It's not magic. It's just very advanced engineering. Within 2 weeks, human factories began producing the first Earth-built energy weapons. They were crude compared to Zeltharian equipment, but they worked. Colonel Sam Taylor tested the first prototype in a Nevada desert facility, watching as the beam reduced a tank to scattered atoms. "It's not as elegant as theirs," he reported to General Brooks, "but it gets the job done. More importantly, we can make hundreds of them." The Zeltharians, meanwhile, had grown complacent. They saw human curiosity as harmless fascination with superior technology. When human delegations requested tours of their ships, the aliens agreed, believing it would demonstrate their overwhelming advantage. Captain Beth Sullivan led one such tour, her military training disguised beneath the credentials of a cultural anthropologist. She memorized every corridor, every control panel, every security measure. Her hidden recording devices captured the layout of the ship's critical systems. "Their weapons are centrally controlled," she reported to her handlers later. "Disable the main power distribution center, and you shut down their entire defensive grid. They've designed their ships for intimidation, not for fighting against enemies with equivalent technology." But the humans' greatest advantage wasn't their growing technological capabilities. It was their capacity to think like their enemies, while maintaining their humanity. Dr. Rodriguez had been studying Zeltharian psychology through intercepted communications and observed behavior patterns. "They've never lost a conquest," she explained to the Secret Planning Committee. "Success has made them predictable. They follow the same patterns every time because those patterns have always worked. They can't imagine that this time might be different." The test of human resolve came when Admiral Corinth grew tired of waiting. His message to Earth's leaders was delivered with cold precision. "The integration process has been delayed long enough. To demonstrate the consequences of continued resistance, we will destroy the city of Portland as an example. Evacuation will not be permitted. Submit now, or watch your people die." The ultimatum was delivered on a Tuesday morning. The Zeltharian fleet moved into position over the Pacific Northwest, their weapons powered up and ready to turn a major city into glass. News broadcasts around the world showed terrified civilians and helpless government officials. But the aliens had made a crucial error. They had given humanity 6 months to prepare. As the first Zeltharian bombardment beam lanced down toward Portland, it struck an invisible barrier 50 kilometers above the city. The energy scattered harmlessly across a shield grid that hadn't existed the day before. The attack failed completely. "Impossible," Admiral Corinth said from his flagship's bridge. "Their technology cannot match ours. They have no planetary defense systems." He was wrong on both counts. Luke Harrison watched from his command center as the shield grid performed exactly as designed. "All stations report green across the board. The city is completely protected." The shield generators had been built in secret using stolen Zeltharian technology, but powered by Earth's vast industrial capacity. What the aliens accomplished with a few elegant devices, humans had achieved through brute force and determination. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're getting signals from underground installations around the city. The resistance cells are in position." The Battle of Portland began not with surrender, but with humanity's first coordinated strike against Zeltharian ground forces. Energy weapons that shouldn't exist opened fire from hidden positions throughout the city. Shield disruptors that violated every assumption about human technological capability disabled alien personal protection. Marine Captain Beth Sullivan led the assault on the main Zeltharian command post. Her team moved through the building with practiced efficiency, their weapons cutting through alien defenders who had never faced enemies with equivalent firepower. "This is impossible," Commander Zephal transmitted to his superiors as his forces fell back from positions they had held for months. "The humans have weapons that match our own. They have shields that can block our bombardment. How did they advance so quickly?" The answer was simple, though the aliens couldn't understand it. Humanity had done what humans always did when faced with impossible odds. They had learned, adapted, and refused to give up. Dr. Adams and his team had reverse-engineered alien technology, not through superior intellect, but through determination and the willingness to work 18-hour days for 6 months straight. Colonel Taylor had trained resistance fighters not because he was a military genius, but because he understood that freedom was worth any sacrifice. The battle raged for 3 days. Zeltharian forces, designed for intimidation and occupation, found themselves fighting against an enemy that had studied their every weakness. Human tactics, learned from decades of warfare against each other, proved devastatingly effective against aliens who had never faced serious resistance. When the smoke cleared, Portland still stood. The Zeltharian command post was in human hands. Nearly half the alien ground forces were dead or captured, and the rest were trapped in their ships, afraid to venture outside. Admiral Corinth stared at the tactical displays showing his forces' positions around Earth. What should have been a simple punishment had become a military disaster. For the first time in the Empire's history, a planetary conquest had failed. "Send a message to the High Command," he ordered his communications officer. "Request immediate reinforcements, full battle fleet deployment." The message that went out across space carried words that had never been transmitted before in Zeltharian history. "We need help." On Earth, humans celebrated their first victory against impossible odds. But in secret planning rooms and hidden laboratories, military leaders and scientists were already preparing for the next phase of the conflict. The Zeltharians had brought 847 species into their empire through intimidation and superior technology. They had never encountered a species that responded to intimidation by building better weapons and learning to fight back. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their refusal to surrender, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The war for Earth's independence was just beginning. The Dark Sovereign battle fleet emerged from hyperspace like an angry storm cloud. 312 vessels of war spread across the outer edges of Earth's solar system, their weapons charged and ready for total destruction. Admiral Corinth stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the blue planet that had humiliated his forces 6 months earlier. "This time will be different," he announced to his bridge crew. "We will not underestimate them again. Full bombardment of all population centers. No negotiations. No mercy." The fleet carried enough firepower to crack continents and boil oceans. These were not exploration ships or occupation forces, but dedicated instruments of war that had shattered rebellions across a dozen galaxies. The message they carried was simple: complete surrender or complete annihilation. But as the Zeltharian armada moved toward Earth, they encountered something that made no sense according to their intelligence reports. Human ships rose to meet them from behind the moon and asteroid belt, emerging from hidden positions throughout the solar system. The vessels looked crude compared to Zeltharian designs, but there were hundreds of them. Captain Danny Pierce stood on the bridge of the destroyer Liberty, watching the alien fleet approach on his tactical display. His ship was one of 50 destroyers built in secret shipyards using stolen alien technology and human industrial might. Each one carried weapons that could punch through Zeltharian armor and shields that could deflect their energy beams. "All ships, this is Pierce," he broadcast to the human fleet. "Remember your training. We're outnumbered 3-1, but we're fighting for our home. Make every shot count." The battle began when the first Zeltharian dreadnought fired its main cannon at the approaching human fleet. The massive energy beam should have vaporized anything in its path. Instead, it struck the combined shields of 3 human destroyers and scattered harmlessly into space. "Impossible," Admiral Corinth said, watching his most powerful weapon fail against primitive human technology. Their shields shouldn't be able to stop a Dreadnought-class beam. He was thinking like an engineer. Instead of a warrior, the human shields couldn't stop the beam individually, but they didn't have to. Working together, they could redirect and absorb the energy across multiple ships. It was inefficient and required perfect coordination, but it worked. Lieutenant Ashley Turner commanded the corvette Phoenix, the smallest ship in the human fleet. Her vessel carried only 6 crew members and weapons that were barely functional by Zeltharian standards. But she had something the aliens had never encountered: absolute determination and complete willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. "Phoenix to all ships," she broadcast as her sensors detected a weakness in the enemy formation. "I have a clear run at their command vessel. Cover me." Turner's ship accelerated toward the Zeltharian flagship at maximum speed, taking hit after hit from enemy weapons. Her shields failed. Then her armor began to melt under alien fire. But she kept flying, her crew working desperately to keep the engines running for just 10 more seconds. The Phoenix struck the Dark Sovereign's shield barrier and exploded, but the explosion was precisely timed. Turner had packed her ship with every explosive device the human fleet could spare, turning her vessel into a guided missile. The blast overloaded the flagship's shields and sent feedback through their power systems. "Direct hit on the enemy command ship," reported Danny Pierce. "Their shields are down. All ships focus fire on the flagship." The battle became a nightmare for the Zeltharian forces. They had expected to face frightened primitives with inferior weapons. Instead, they fought against enemies who used tactics they had never seen before. Human ships that were crippled and dying continued to fight, ramming into alien vessels or using their final moments to protect other ships in the fleet. Dr. Nina Cross monitored the battle from her research station on the far side of the moon. Her job was to study Zeltharian psychology and behavior patterns, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. What she observed terrified the aliens more than any human weapon. "They're breaking," she reported to Earth Command. "I'm intercepting communications from multiple alien ships. They're requesting permission to retreat. They've never faced enemies who refuse to surrender when their situation becomes hopeless." The psychological impact was devastating. Zeltharian crews had been trained for thousands of years to fight against enemies who would eventually give up when faced with overwhelming force. They had no experience dealing with opponents who fought harder when things looked impossible. Captain Pierce watched as his tactical display showed the alien formation beginning to collapse. Ships that should have pressed their advantage were pulling back. Crews that should have fought to the death were abandoning positions when faced with human boarding parties. "All ships, they're starting to break formation," he announced. "Push forward. Don't give them time to regroup." The human fleet, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, began pushing the Zeltharian forces back through sheer aggression and refusal to accept defeat. Ships like the destroyer Defiance, commanded by Captain Josh Miller, pursued retreating alien vessels and destroyed them before they could escape. But the most shocking moment came when Admiral Corinth's flagship began to retreat from the battle. The Dark Sovereign, flagship of the most powerful fleet in Zeltharian history, was running away from a force of primitive human vessels. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 47 ships in our fleet. They're requesting permission to withdraw from combat." Corinth stared at the display showing his forces in full retreat. In 3,000 years of Imperial history, no Zeltharian fleet had ever been forced to withdraw from a battle with a primitive species. The psychological impact on his crews was complete and devastating. "Signal full retreat," he ordered finally. "All ships withdraw to hyperspace jump distance." But the humans weren't finished. As the Zeltharian fleet tried to escape, human ships continued their attacks. Vessels that should have been grateful for the aliens' withdrawal instead pursued them relentlessly, destroying stragglers and damaged ships. The destroyer Independence, commanded by Captain Mike Rogers, caught up with a crippled Zeltharian cruiser trying to reach the jump point. Instead of demanding surrender, Rogers simply opened fire with everything his ship had, reducing the alien vessel to debris. "This is independence to all human ships," Rogers broadcast. "No prisoners. No mercy. They came here to destroy our world." The message was intercepted by Zeltharian communication systems throughout the fleet. For the first time in their history, they faced enemies who were more ruthless than they were. The psychological effect was complete terror. Admiral Corinth's fleet limped away from Earth with less than half their original numbers. Ships that had seemed invincible 6 hours earlier were now running for their lives from human vessels that shouldn't have been able to scratch their paint. "Send a message to High Command," Corinth ordered as his flagship prepared to jump to hyperspace. "Full evacuation of this sector. These humans are not a primitive species. They are a threat to the entire Empire." As the last Zeltharian ship vanished into hyperspace, Captain Pierce surveyed the aftermath of humanity's greatest victory. His fleet had lost 30 ships and nearly 2,000 crew members, but they had achieved something impossible. They had defeated the most powerful military force in known galactic history. "All ships, this is Pierce," he broadcast to the surviving human fleet. "Well done, everyone. We've shown the galaxy that Earth will not surrender. But this is just the beginning. They'll be back with more ships and better preparation." Dr. Cross analyzed the intercepted alien communications and reached a disturbing conclusion. "They're not just retreating," she reported to Earth Command. "They're terrified. We've broken something fundamental in their psychology. They've never encountered enemies who fight like we do. The Battle of Earth was over, but its consequences would reshape the galaxy. For the first time in 3 millennia, the Zeltharian Empire had been forced to retreat from a conquest. More importantly, they had encountered a species that was more dangerous than any they had faced before. News of the defeat spread through alien communication networks across the galaxy. Species that had been conquered centuries earlier began to whisper about the humans who had done the impossible. Rebellion movements that had been crushed years ago began to stir with new hope. But on Earth, military planners were already preparing for the next phase of the conflict. They knew the aliens would return eventually, and when they did, humanity would be ready. The humans had learned that they could fight the Zeltharian Empire and win. Now they were going to learn what happened when humanity decided to take the fight to their enemies. Admiral Corinth floated in the medical bay of his crippled flagship, his body held together by emergency life support systems. The Dark Sovereign drifted powerless in deep space, its engines destroyed and most of its crew dead. Around him, the few surviving officers worked desperately to keep their ship from falling apart completely. "Sir," reported his communications officer through a damaged voice system, "we're receiving a transmission from an approaching human vessel." Corinth closed his eyes and felt something he had never experienced in 40 years of military service. Complete defeat. The humans had done more than win a battle. They had shattered everything he believed about war, conquest, and the natural order of the galaxy. "Put them through," he said quietly. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and controlled, speaking with the confidence of someone who held all the advantages. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel Horizon. Admiral Corinth, you are requested to prepare for boarding. Any resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your ship." 10 minutes later, Jake Morrison walked through the airlock of the Dark Sovereign wearing a simple spacesuit and carrying no visible weapons. Behind him came Dr. Elena Rodriguez and 2 medical technicians carrying emergency supplies. The human captain looked around at the damaged bridge and the wounded alien crew with something that surprised Corinth completely. Compassion. "Admiral," Jake said, approaching the medical bay where Corinth lay connected to life support machines. "I'm here to talk, not to gloat." Corinth studied the human's face, looking for signs of the savage cruelty he expected from a primitive species. Instead, he saw intelligence, determination, and something else that confused him. The human was treating him like a fellow military officer rather than a defeated enemy. "Why?" Corinth asked through damaged vocal cords. "Why didn't you just destroy my ship? We came here to annihilate your entire species." Jake pulled up a chair and sat down beside the alien's medical bed. Dr. Rodriguez began checking the Admiral's wounds and setting up additional life support equipment to stabilize his condition. "Because you need to carry a message back to your empire," Jake explained. And because destroying helpless enemies isn't what humans do, despite what you might think about us. Over the next hour, Jake Morrison explained exactly what had happened during the 6 months of Zeltharian occupation. He showed Corinth recordings of human factories that had been converted to produce alien-based weapons. He displayed tactical analyses of every Zeltharian ship design and weapon system. He presented intelligence reports that detailed the Empire's military capabilities across dozens of star systems. "We didn't just reverse engineer your technology," Jake said, bringing up holographic displays of human ship designs. "We improved it. Our weapons are more efficient than yours. Our shields can absorb more punishment. Our ships are built for war, not intimidation." Corinth stared at the technical specifications in growing horror. The human ships weren't just copies of Zeltharian designs. They were evolved versions that solved problems the Empire's engineers had never even recognized. "Impossible. You've had our technology for less than a year." "We had your technology for 6 months, Dr. Rodriguez corrected, looking up from her medical equipment. "We've had war for 6,000 years. Fighting and building weapons is what humans do best." Jake activated another display showing star maps of the local galactic region. Red markers indicated human ships that were already spreading throughout space, moving toward other star systems at faster than light speeds. "Admiral, your Empire controls 847 species across 12 galaxies. But those species never wanted to be conquered. They submitted because they had no choice. We're offering them a different option." The display zoomed in on specific star systems where human ships had made contact with conquered species. Intelligence reports showed rebellion movements that had been dormant for centuries suddenly becoming active again. Weapons caches were appearing on occupied worlds. Zeltharian garrison forces were reporting increased resistance activities. "You're arming our subject species," Corinth said, his voice filled with a mixture of admiration and terror. "We're offering freedom to people who want it," Jake replied. "Some of your subject species are happy under Imperial rule. We leave them alone. But others have been waiting centuries for someone to give them the tools they need to fight back." Captain Josh Miller's voice came through the communication system from his ship, the destroyer Retribution. "Jake, we're getting reports from our advance teams. The Calith system has declared independence and is requesting military support. The Vorthak, homeworld, has expelled its Zeltharian governors. We're seeing uprisings on 47 worlds across 3 sectors." Corinth felt his heart stop for a moment. 47 worlds. In a single day, the Empire had lost more territory than it had in the previous century. "This is impossible. Our military forces in those systems should be able to suppress any rebellion." "Your military forces are designed to intimidate populations that have inferior technology," Dr. Rodriguez explained, as she administered medication to ease the Admiral's pain. "They're not equipped to fight against people who have weapons that match their own." Jake brought up another display showing human industrial capacity. Factories on Earth and throughout the solar system were producing ships and weapons at a rate that dwarfed anything in Zeltharian space. "Every day we build more ships and train more crews. Every week we make contact with more of your conquered species. Every month your empire gets smaller." The implications were staggering. The Zeltharian Empire had spent 3,000 years building a galactic civilization based on technological superiority and military intimidation. In less than a year, humans had given their subject species the tools and knowledge needed to fight back. "What do you want?" Corinth asked finally. "Complete withdrawal of all Zeltharian forces from human space," Jake said. "Recognition of the independence of any species that chooses to leave your empire. And most importantly, an end to your expansion into new territories." "And if the Empire refuses?" Jake's expression became cold and hard, showing the steel that had allowed humanity to defeat impossible odds. "Then we continue what we started here. We visit every world in your empire and offer them the same choice we're offering now: freedom or continued subjugation. Eventually, you'll run out of subjects to rule." Corinth realized that he was witnessing the end of everything his civilization had built. The Empire had conquered 847 species, but they had done it by finding isolated worlds and overwhelming them with superior technology. They had never faced a species that could match their capabilities and then use that knowledge to undermine their entire galactic structure. The High Command will never accept these terms, he said. Then the High Command will watch their empire crumble one system at a time, Jake replied. Admiral, your people made one critical mistake. You assumed that because we were technologically primitive, we were also stupid. You thought you could intimidate us into surrender. Instead, you gave us time to study your weaknesses and prepare for war. Dr. Rodriguez finished her medical examination and packed up her equipment. He'll live, she reported to Jake. His injuries are serious but not fatal. He should be able to travel within a few days. Jake stood up and moved toward the airlock. Admiral, your ship's communication systems are still functional. I suggest you use them to contact your High Command. Tell them exactly what you've learned here. Tell them that the next time they encounter human ships, they should remember this conversation. As the humans prepared to leave, Corinth called out one final question. What makes you think you can defeat an empire that spans 12 galaxies? Jake turned back with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Admiral, we're not trying to defeat your empire. We're giving it a choice. Evolve or die. Learn to coexist with free species or watch everything you've built fall apart. The galaxy is big enough for all of us, as long as everyone gets to choose their own path. After the humans left, Corinth lay in his medical bed staring at the ceiling of his damaged ship. Around him, his surviving crew worked to restore basic systems and prepare for the long journey home. But the Admiral's mind was focused on the message he would have to deliver to the High Command. For 3,000 years, the Zeltharian Empire had been the dominant force in known space. They had built their civilization on the simple principle that superior technology gave them the right to rule over inferior species. Now they faced enemies who had turned that principle against them. The humans had done something no other species had managed. They had made the Empire afraid. Not afraid of losing a battle or even a war, but afraid of the idea that their entire way of life might be wrong. Admiral Corinth composed his final report as his ship limped toward home. The message he would carry back to Zeltharian space contained words that had never been written before in Imperial history. Recommend immediate cessation of all expansion activities. Recommend defensive positioning of all fleets. Recommend negotiation with human representatives. The Empire faces an enemy that cannot be defeated through conventional warfare. They fight not just for territory or resources, but for an idea that threatens our entire social structure. They believe that freedom is more important than order, that choice is more valuable than